Online at consumerqb.com.
All right, welcome back. Thanks for sticking with us. Brandon Rhymes here, Consumer Quarterback Show, powered by the Platinum MVP team at Keller Williams Realty. We got Dr. Harold Schnitzky coming up here in just a moment. We got some interesting topics we're going to discuss with him. Before we do, we always like to feature our real estate listings live on air as part of a strategy to help sellers sell faster for more money, maximizing the exposure and the profit on the sale of their real estate properties. We got a co-listing here in Orlando. This is on Pebble Creek Court in Orlando, Florida, just outside of Orlando, town called Claremont. You're about 10 minutes here from Disney, Universal. So we have a vacant land parcel here. This is 100 acres of land available for sale, $13 million listing, a co-listing we have with the Meraki Group over in Orlando. So the great proximity here to Disney, Universal, SeaWorld, a lot of value in that, in 100 acres of prime development land. So we are commercial brokers as well as residential and, of course, vacant land. Also, another listing in the same area. This is 17805 US 192, Claremont, Florida. This is a Denny's. So up front, you've got a Denny's up front. You have also office space in the back. Completely 100% occupied office here. 17805 US 192 in Claremont, Florida. This one is a single-story, multi-tenant retail opportunity that has almost 1,800 square foot of rentable space, 100% occupied, and 122 on-site parking spaces, close proximity commercial retail as well. And you can see all of our listings at platinumcoastalelite.com. All right, give a quick shout out to our friends at Replenish IV Solutions as well. I just left their South Tampa location and had a visit with the nurse down there, and just got hooked up with the vitamin infusion drip. All the good stuff going into my bloodstream, boosting the immunity, boosting your immune system. ReplenishIVSolutions.com. Make sure you let them know the real estate quarterback sent you. Just take them up on those special offers. All right, Dr. Harold Schnitzky, welcome back, sir.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
My pleasure as well. And author of A Champion's Mindset. I picked out a couple pages here to go into, but we recently, we're dealing with a loss. Part of life, right? You have highs and lows. You have losses. We had a member of our team that had passed away, and unfortunately, looks like it was a suicide situation. So I wanted to kind of share that with our audience. Thank you for that. And how to cope and how to deal with stresses and how to deal with these situations. So dealing with stress and loss.
It's important to realize that a lot, when we look at the research in that area, that we have seen an uptick over the last couple of decades.
Yes.
It's not just a recent issue. As a matter of fact, since 2000, where the rate was around 10%, and then it jumped to 12% a decade later, and now it's into the 14%. It's a complex problem that requires complex solutions.
I'm sorry, that's an astounding number.
Yes.
You're saying that 14% of our overall population?
Per 100,000.
Per 100,000.
Yeah. It is astonishing that as a society that we have this reality.
Yeah.
There are issues that are going on that need to be addressed, and for the most part, I think too many people use what I would refer to as a reductionistic point of view. They just kind of say, well, this is the cause, or this is the one reason. And when you start doing that, you're missing the totality. I think it was Nietzsche who said, to stereotype me is to negate me. And so each person is struggling in their own way for their issues.
Okay.
And what happens behind closed doors, many of us may be blind to it. But a lot of individuals who have harmed themselves, we know that the vast majority of them have actually seen someone or talked to someone in the medical field. They've actually gone and seen a provider over the last 3 months and didn't bring that up. It might be because we're too focused on the topic presentation rather than asking what's going on. And so we're encouraging medical providers and certainly mental health providers to assess that on an ongoing basis for the warning signs.
Okay.
To just be able to have a conversation. Because as I'm assessing my patient, my patient is assessing me.
Okay.
And so I have to be able to create an environment that says that let's take a moment, let's talk about everything under the sun. What brings you in today, but let's cover some other things too. And so knowing warning signs are important.
There you go. Yep.
And it might be important for us to share with your listeners when they have people in their life if you see certain things where they're having significant changes in their behavior, when you see them not really taking care of personal hygiene, when there's a tendency, there's nothing wrong with getting a will together and kind of organizing one's life. But when you start hearing them talk about depressive issues and they become fixated on it, if they talk of harming themselves, there's a passive approach where someone says, if I go to bed, I hope I don't wake up. So it's not active, but it's passive, yet that is rather significant. Substance abuse increasing.
Right.
If someone has had a thought, has it been, do they have a plan associated with that? Do they have a specific intention? Do they have access to whatever the means are that they're talking about?
Right.
So it's kind of like following the kind of the significance of the lethality of it. You have to monitor that.
Yeah.
People may have a thought, and that's all. But when you start looking at all of these issues where they start to isolate themselves, changes significantly in their sleep, appetite, all of these factors are significant where someone should actually be considerate, thoughtful. If it's a mental health provider, we need to be able to step in.
Yeah.
If it's a loved one, it's important to be there for them, to be able to remove, if they talk about whatever the method is, if they talk about a weapon or to harm themselves with pills, if they have access to remove those, to be able to refer when they need help. And so I always like to mention, I encourage people, don't make a permanent decision to a temporary problem.
Right.
If you need help, seek help.
Yep.
And recently, a year ago, as a matter of fact, we as a society stepped up and decided we got to do something different. So we have 911 for the police, we have 411 for information, and now we have 988. And most people don't know this, but it is the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. It's a national line. They have multi-language opportunities on there, and they have real people, not just the recording, actually responding. And since July of 22 to March of 23, they had, I believe it was 3.6 million contacts.
Wow.
So it is a need. We have to be able to respond to this.
Yeah.
And as a society, I hope that we do open our eyes and become compassionate to be able to do something and step in.
Yeah, especially now. That's great. So 988 is that number. That's interesting. So that's an example of government doing something positive, whereas over the last 2 or 3 years, a lot of people would argue that the government has been a catalyst for the negative in the masking, the mandates, the lockdowns, a lot of the disinformation going out, especially for young people. We have one of the most drug using generations, abusing alcohol. And of course, last time we talked a little bit about cell phones and the technologies that come into play. I wanted to ask you this because I heard something said to the effect that I think it was something where females are more likely to commit suicide, whereas a lot of the different rampage shooters and active shooters are more males.
You bring up a very interesting point. Let me kind of unpack a bunch of that.
Yeah.
Again, I don't want to just narrow it to, well, what happened over the last couple of years. This has been a trend for 2 decades. But
aren't the numbers significantly over the COVID years, aren't they up significantly?
We've seen recently an uptick, but it's still at the same level as going back to like 2000, I think it was 18 when we had similar. It dropped, and then it's popped back up.
Okay.
Females are more likely to attempt suicide. Men are more likely to commit suicide. They use more lethal means.
Okay.
So if someone says it, don't just kind of minimize it.
Right.
As it works out, when the provisional numbers came out, and they just came out a month ago about 2022. Okay. So this is all data that's being run through right now. They had over 49,000 suicides committed in that year. Of that amount, of the 49,000, 39,000 of those were men. 37,000 of those were individuals who were white. If you think the population is 50-50 approximately, men committing 39 out of the 49, that's 80% of the suicides committed.
Yeah.
And so we have this reality that there are individuals who we may not necessarily look at as being suicidal.
Right.
But it is happening.
Right.
And so this is where a lot of times people talk about the whole research and science, and you know me, I'm a scientist, and I follow the kind of recommendations by what I would consider learned, scholarly people who do epidemiological long-term studies, and I trust and respect that. And so we want to use data to be able to help us to be able to make better decisions. Interesting enough, this last year, the youngest group, the 10 to 24-year-olds, had an 8% drop in suicide. So it seems as though some of the preventive mental health services that we've got in society or in schools has been helpful.
Yeah.
And if we can now begin to replicate that with other groups too, but it is a tragic reality that we have such high numbers. And the most frequent method we know straight up is 54%, over 54% of suicides are committed by firearms, which we also know in homicides.
Yeah.
And so, not to say anything, and I don't take a political stand on any of these things, I just share data on this. It's important that we can just be considerate of this, that we have this information, and what do we do with it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, there's a lot there. I think another big point that we haven't touched on yet, and by the way, if you just joined us, I'm talking with Dr. Harold Schnitzky here on the Consumer Quarterback Show, a longtime friend of the program. I'm your host, Brandon Rhymes, and we're talking about overall mental health, suicide rates, et cetera. I think one of the biggest overarching themes also is the morality of our country, where we're at as far as biblical values, and we're talking on a faith-based station now and I grew up Christian. I grew up in a Baptist. My mom was very into church, and Dad was a little bit, he'd come along, type of thing. But I think if you look at the numbers there, the statistics there too, more people are less following, let's just say the 10 Commandments, right? We're less people are involved in their churches, and I think there's several variables for that. But I think to a certain extent, faith and the ability to guide children and mold them in that image of God, right? The following the biblical values. I think that plays a role in it too.
It's interesting you talk about morality, and there's also the issue of civility that we've seen kind of a degrading across society.
Yeah, that's true.
We are supposed to have a separation of church and state, and as a country, but there's also benefits that we know from a protective point of view in terms of this tragic subject that we're covering right now. That individuals who do have connectedness, where they have bonded to others, and if there are values, so the idea that if I can believe in a greater power, we actually have individuals who have a decrease in anxiety and stress, which is an interesting dynamic because we know that also increases the likelihood of at-risk behavior if you have the opposite, if you feel alone and isolated. Individuals who feel, and the thing I look at when I come across an individual who reports pretty extreme depression is, do they feel hopeless and helpless? Hopeless that the future, whatever's happening now, will not change.
Right.
And helpless, I have no method of changing it.
Right.
And so if I can be a part of a group, an organization, a faith-based organization,
12 steps or something,
whatever it might be, that helps me get through. It's a coping mechanism. It's a support network. And we want to be able to encourage more of that, whatever it is for each person. Yeah.
No, that's some good stuff. We got to take a quick break here. I want to talk about the Ted Williams, trying to change the tone there. But I do have, I think the idea of separation of church and state is actually misconstrued. I think if you listen to, like Dennis Prager, Charlie Kirk, they talk about the Federalist Papers. I think that's where it was first introduced, but we don't have time to explore that now. But yeah, I think we need more church in our schools. I think we need more of the religion back into our schools, the morality, the values, and I think it's a myth of the separation of church and state, but we can analyze that later. Coming up more with Dr. Harold Schnitzky, Ted Williams, one of the greatest hitters of all time, Major League Baseball. We're going to talk about that, a page out of his book here, A Champion's Mindset, coming up here on the Consumer Quarterback Show. Follow us online. We'd love to connect with you at CQB Show, at Brandon Rhymes 1, and of course on YouTube, Brandon Rhymes Realty. We'll be right back here on the Consumer Quarterback Show, consumerqb.com. Patriot Mobile is America's only Christian conservative wireless provider who shares your values. They offer the very best nationwide coverage on 4G and 5G LTE networks and exceptional 100% US-based customer support. Patriot Mobile offers discounts for veterans and first responders, NRA members, and families with multiple lines. Learn more at patriotmobile.com/consumer QB. That's patriotmobile.com/consumer QB. Or if you'd like to give us a call, you can reach out at 727-263-3707. That's 727-263-3707. And we'd be happy to tell you more about Patriot Mobile. Selling commercial, vacant land, or residential properties? Don't leave money on the table. List with the Platinum MVP team at Keller Williams Realty. I'm Brandon Rhymes. You can reach me at 727-263-3707. Call or text 727-263-3707. Online at consumerqb.com.
You're listening to The Consumer Quarterback, Brandon Rhymes, online at consumerqb.com. Brandon is Tampa Bay's #1 consumer advocate for real estate and financial advice. Call Brandon today at 813-917-1894.
All right, welcome back. Brandon Rhymes here. Quick shout out to the Bilmar Beach Resort, the official hotel partner of the Consumer Quarterback Show. Say hello to Clyde Smith, general manager over at the Bilmar Beach Resort on Treasure Island, the official restaurant partner, or hotel partner, that is, the Consumer Quarterback Show. They got great restaurants on site, too. Sloppy Joe's Beach Bar and Restaurant. Great place to stay and enjoy that Tampa Bay staycation. Check them out online, book direct, BilmarBeachResort.com. Let them know the Real Estate Quarterback sent you. All right, hot property listing here in Tampa Bay, 9749 Little Blue Stem Drive. This one is a two-story home. Owner is motivated here. This is a beautiful family home. You got a fenced-in backyard, 4 bedrooms, 2.5 bath, 2-car garage, 2334 square foot. And this is a two-story home in the coveted Connerton community. I love these planned unit developments from a sense of they've got multiple pools. They have a dual pools there, a lap pool, splash park, miles of trails, on-site elementary school as well. You can see all of our real estate listings at PlatinumCoastalElite.com.
This is God's country.
All right, so I'm taking a page out of Dr. Schnitzky's book here. This is a champion's mindset. But yeah, I was reading this over the weekend as an example. So we're talking about expectations, and this one's, switching gears here to baseball and I guess just overall coaching in a sense. But Ted Williams, arguably baseball's best hitter, failed 6 out of 10 times. Consider the math. Williams failed more than half the time. Williams' ability to still serves as an example of excellence in baseball. And you think of guys like him, and I just saw a clip on Pete Rose the other day, and but yeah, sometimes we have these unrealistic expectations in business as well, and that can keep us down.
Yeah, when we focus on outcomes, we are not focusing on what are the steps that actually get us there, the process. And in baseball, as we were saying at the break, if I hit a single in the first inning and I strike out in the fourth and I get a ground out in the bottom of the seventh, and I do that every game for my entire career, most people would think, that's a pretty lousy experience. It's like, no, that's 333. You're actually going to the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Having realistic expectations. So you're not going to close every deal.
Yeah.
The thing that you control is your preparation for it, your attitude as you go in, the homework that you have, how you can connect with someone. Yeah. What's their pain point? How can you address that and resolve that? It certainly doesn't guarantee anything. And as I always like to say, there are no guarantees.
Right.
So what can you do to increase your probability of success?
Yeah.
And as you promote the locations, by the way, I was just out at the Bilmar and Sloppy Joe's, and a shout out to that group. I had a surf and turf burger with shrimp and lobster sauce.
Nice.
I'm just saying. The reality for each individual is when you go in for a sale, you don't control that outcome. You actually can have the best product.
Yeah.
But it doesn't guarantee that the customer is going to agree with you.
Exactly.
I know a lot of people in the financial institutions who will come and talk to doctors, and they will consistently say doctors are the worst of the clients to go and talk to because they'll come in with all the answers for that provider. Yeah. And then the provider will say, I'm going to go with my friend, with what they said.
And they were just using you to try to figure out what your marketing approach would be or what your valuation would be. We got a a fellow salesperson in the studio here that's a business broker. So yeah, a lot of times they'll waste our time just to figure out what our strategy would be. Oh, what would you value this at, right? And then come up and then they say, oh, they're going with their sister-in-law anyway, or brother-in-law, whatever. Anyways, one thing that came to mind too when you mentioned that is because I also teach classes called Win with Sellers. It's a class through Keller Williams that I teach how to win with sellers. But one of the most simple things you can do is smile. It's called the smiling effect. You're 31% smarter by simply smiling. And when you have a listing appointment and you're talking to somebody and you're building rapport and you're smiling, how hard is it to have a somber attitude back at that person that's constantly smiling at you, right?
Wonderful statement. The nonverbals. We actually know that from the research, 60 to 80% of all communication is nonverbal.
Yeah.
It's not just what you say, it's how you say it. The establishment of a relationship, if someone is bringing something up, the nonverbals of confirming, validating, legitimating, kind of, I can just simply, you and I are nodding when we're
encouraging.
kind of, tell me more about that. What I hear you saying, paraphrasing back,
Yes.
I'm actually listening.
Yeah.
If at all possible, I usually encourage people when someone introduces themselves, say their name back to them
Yes.
before you're already going into your mode of what I'm going to say. And when you're looking at someone, look at them in order to tell what color their eyes are.
I like that.
And a lot of times people are surprised because you actually feel connected more with that individual.
Oh, yeah. Neuroresonance. You have a neuroresonance. That's why with the radio show, I love having in-studio visits versus on the phone. Of course, we can do on the phone. We can facilitate that. We do a little Zoom here and there. But it's so much better in person because you're able to feed off that energy. You're able to kind of predict and feel that energy. But we've just got a few minutes here left. I wanted to go into what are some other big topics that you're seeing on a daily basis? What are some of your, the consumer quarterback show here? What are some of the biggest, misnomers in your space as a consumer and beyond?
Well, I'd like to be able to mention that. How do I stay in the moment? If we know that if I dwell on the past, I'll be depressed, and if I focus on the future, I'm going to be anxious. And so we talk about you wake up, you have a finite amount of energy.
Yeah.
You can waste your energy by wishing the past was different.
Exactly.
I cannot change that it happened. So we want to live and learn from it in order to move forward.
Yeah.
We can't control the future, but we can increase our probability. So rather than worrying about the future, how adaptive can I be? How well can I plan? And then the last one, which is whining about things outside of my control.
Yes.
That I can't take care of those things, but I can focus on me. So wishing the past was different, worrying about the future, or whining about things outside of our control will waste your energy and time.
I love it. And here's one I wanted to get to, too. My pastor at church mentioned that worry leads to fear, concern leads to prayer. And that leads me to this next clip. I want to play a quick clip here from one of my favorites, Joel Osteen.
That's what activates the flow. But there were many sick people in the crowd that day, many people that needed healing, restoration, breakthroughs. They bumped up against Jesus. At times they made contact, but nothing happened. What was different about this lady? She touched him with expectancy, believing that healing was coming, knowing that things were about to change.
I love that story. So it's the story that, she just touches his robe as he's walking by, and he says, who touched me? He could feel the expectancy, right? So I think that's a big key component, especially if you're in sales or any type of business. But to live with expectancy and to have that, there's something positive there. There's something energetic there as well.
Absolutely. Well, if you look at it from string theory, we're all vibration, and
Right.
Can you actually resonate at the same level, and hence to be able to communicate, to be able to connect. That's obviously a topic for another show. The curious nature, that idea of connection, of bonding. What can you do to be an ally to the person that you're interacting with?
Yeah.
It's not my primary needs, it's your primary needs. How can I take care of it?
How do you want people to connect with you, Dr. Schnitzky?
They can go online to www.drschnitzky.com, DRSHINITZKY.com. You can give me a call. My number's on that. Looking forward to be able to help in anyone I can.
Awesome. Good stuff. Thank you again for coming in, and always a pleasure to kind of mix it up a little bit there and talk about some of these different, but yeah, it's tough, man. society on one hand is dealing with some really awful situations, but there's so much positivity out there too. So again, focus on that positivity and find where you can be a positive influence. So thank you for that. Please go out there, consider committing a random act of kindness, do something kind for one another, be a force for good in the community. We'll see you next time. Consumer Quarterback Show, consumerqb.com.
You've been listening to The Consumer Quarterback. Brandon.